Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name is David Wheatley. We're here to talk leadership in small, bite-sized and practical chunks. Enjoy. So this is episode 201. And we're going to be taking a bit of a break for a few months and restart back or in March of 2025. So this will be the last episode for a while. But there's 201 episodes to go back and have a look at. Lots of them still well relevant and up to date. So in this episode, it's an episode of our First Friday work sessions. And if you've not come across First Friday yet, go to humanergy.com. You can register for a free 1 hour leadership conversation and work session. And the people who join are finding them really high value. One of the things that we do in those First Fridays is one of our humanigists will take about 10-15 minutes to share some insight that's going on in their mind at the moment. And this time it's Corey Fernandez who's going to be talking about powerful questions. If you look at our website, you'll see that the spring 2025 First Friday agenda is already built. And it's all helping people address the sense of overwhelm that is when our metaphorical backpack is full. And how do we deal with that? So join us in 2025 for those First Friday episodes. Register at humanergy.com. Here's Corey Fernandez.
We're grateful to have you here learning alongside with us. And hopefully we'll continue to just put forth like a really great conversation today around powerful questions, an area that actually I'm really passionate about. And so when we get into our conversation today, I thought these 4 topics might be useful to explore together. In leadership, why do questions matter? Just questions, why do they matter to us in leadership? Not all questions are created equal. What makes powerful questions powerful? And the last, what can I do to practice? And so that will be the way that we kind of cap off the presentation today. And what I thought when I was prepping for this idea of powerful questions, I couldn't stop thinking about somebody I worked with in a former part of my career. And that person's name is Jim Howden. Jared Page will get a kick out of this because Jared and I both have worked alongside Jim. And what I learned about Jim early in his career is Jim actually spent a lot of time in a think tank exploring adult learning. And Jim was fascinated by this idea that there is engagement or a lack of engagement in organizations. In fact, a lack of engagement in organizations has been kind of a common thing for decades now. So Jim went off to explore things around adult learning. And what he learned is that, dialogue is essential for engagement in change. It is absolutely essential for engagement in change. And at the heart of dialogue are stories and questions. And so Jim took this to heart and he built a consulting business that grew into a $30 million business, then a $40 million consulting business, then a $50 million consulting business to help Fortune 500s largely better equip themselves with stories and questions to engage the organization in the journey of change. And so at the end of the day, when we think about the power of dialogue and stories and questions, those are the things that inspire our growth as human beings. It's the stories that we share. It's the questions that we share and ask of one another that drive our thinking, in fact, that challenge our thinking and change our thinking. And when we can shift our thinking, we can ultimately change our behavior. And then that behavior can be better aligned to pursue the results that are most important to us as human beings, our organizations, our teams, and so on. So questions and stories become critical in that work, right? They are at the heart of our growth. And so with questions, and as we explore questions as an organization, Humanergy is kind of obsessed with the world of questions. In fact, David Wheatley here is the chief question asker or chief question officer at Humanergy. We do a lot of work really trying to pay attention to what matters. And so I just want to share with us this idea that not all questions are created equal. On the left-hand side, we can use questions that start with will you, can you, have you, did you, would you, could you, were you, are you? Is it A or is it B? And these do serve a purpose. And at the end of the day, what we would categorize these as closed questions, right? They often drive a yes or no response. There are other times we can use questions that start with a why or a what if or a how or tell me more. And they're often really importantly followed by silence They open up a space, an area for people to think and then start putting their best thinking forward. They really invite people to share from another's perspective, not just our own. These are a different type of question, right? They're in key in driving robust dialogue, getting things going to provide an exchange of ideas. And it's not multiple questions at the same time. And these are what we would categorize as more open questions, right? Open-ended questions. And so there's a variety of things that actually start to then shape up when we think about this idea of closed and open questions. There are verifying questions. So as we get a little further into this now, there are clarifying questions and there are powerful questions. And verifying questions become really helpful for us to make sure things are getting done, that our to-do list is getting checked off along the way and so on. Clarifying questions are often used to help us get a window into people's worlds. They open up, and help us see what other people are thinking, help us see kind of how other people are approaching a problem, perhaps. And then there are powerful questions which often lead to breakthroughs in thinking. And these are absolutely a different type of question. And so we're going to explore all these right now, kind of give you some examples along the way. So just to dive a little bit deeper here, verifying questions now are often closed questions in most cases. These are things that are producing a yes or no response. They help check the status or probe for progress and quality, kind of ensure or increase that we're kind of moving along the right lines of increasing success. They help us prevent drop balls too, right? And missed opportunities. These are kind of helping make sure that we don't miss out on any mission critical items. And verifying questions are really useful to do this. And I think an important criteria is they most often focus on the needs of the person asking the question versus the person that's being asked. So, for example, if Jared and I were teaming up here in the room and I were making sure that Jared was following up on some progress or a report that he owed me, that verifying question is very much about my need, right? My need to make sure things are moving in the right direction. And so that's an important criteria here. Some examples of these in different types of settings, of course, are the raw materials required for the next production cycle prepared and properly stocked, right? I'm trying to verify that those things are taking place in a manufacturing setting, perhaps. Have you identified potential risks, right? Are mitigation strategies in place to keep the project moving forward? Would be another example, right, of a verifying question. Is your cell phone charged so you can call us if your car is in trouble, if you have car trouble? Again, those are all examples of ways that we can verify that things are taking place and taking shape. They do serve a really important purpose. Now, clarifying questions are a different type of question. These are closed or opened, right? They often more open-ended questions, but they could be closed. They're there in place to strengthen our mutual understanding. They often are very helpful to prevent misunderstandings because we're getting access right into other people's thinking. We're getting a window into their world. And they help, and again, they focus more on the needs of the person asking the question, not the person that's being asked the question. So some examples of these, of course, are what challenges are you facing in your role right now? Again, I'm trying to get a window into somebody else's world. How do you think the team is collaborating on this project? What are you doing to improve communication or efficiency? What's your plan for getting home on time? This might be a really good one for parents, right, that are struggling with those teenagers that are kind of, trying to stretch the boundaries more and more. What's been going through your mind when you decide to stay out past curfew? Help me understand. I need a window into your world, right? And now when we move on to powerful questions, some important criteria here to consider is that these are questions that are often non-judgmental, and they can very much be preceded by deep listening. In fact, some of the most powerful questions, the kind of the prerequisite is that I've heard the person deeply. I've really understood something about them. I've kind of arrived at this place of such curiosity that the question becomes more and more powerful and necessary and useful to that person. They're open-ended, of course, followed by space. They're rooted in self-discovery, helping the person tap into their own internal wisdom. It's not about adopting my thinking necessarily, but really tap into their own internal wisdom and do their own thinking. One of the things that people often struggle with powerful questions in that middle of the slide here is it's not advice disguised as a question. Sometimes we might be thinking we're asking a powerful question or a useful question, and I might say to Sarah, have you tried? And I'm throwing out my advice, right? Followed by a question mark. And it's very much about my thinking, right? what I know to be true or what I want you to try. And I follow that by a question mark. These are in place to jumpstart critical thinking. Again, it's about having breakthroughs. When we ask powerful questions, you often hear people at the end of it say, huh, wow, I really didn't think about it like this until now. You really helped me see something that I didn't see before. And it wasn't because I said this is how you should see it. It's because the question allowed them to explore things in a more meaningful way that they hadn't been allowed to explore before. They unlock, they expand, and they really help remove barriers in some instance. And a lot of the coaching work that we often do, people might see glimpses of a plan or a path forward that they want to pursue, but they might still have some barriers, some anxiety, some challenges thinking through how they might get started. And powerful questions help, again, remove some of those barriers so people are more likely to follow through. And I think one of my favorites here is at the very bottom is when we ask powerful questions, you absolutely see people thinking. You'll see them pause. You might see them actually kind of open up a little bit. You might see their eyes go to a different spot, and silence kind of hits the room. And you can see kind of the wheels turning in their mind because they're deep in thought, trying to work through some different things and tap into their own internal wisdom. Again, a really critical part of the experience with powerful questions. So here's some examples. Again, in a manufacturing setting, once we fix this, what steps can we take to prevent similar issues from happening in the future? Help me understand, what steps can we take to prevent similar issues from happening in the future? Project management might sound like, when you face similar resource allocations in the past, what did you do to address them? Again, kind of tapping into that person's internal wisdom. Looking back at the last few times you missed curfew, what would you change about how you handled those situations? Giving them the space to explore, right? Unlock, kind of see opportunities to do things differently, and so on. And when you start to really practice and practice and practice these powerful questions, it becomes a habit. So, at the heart of all this, and so what I want to do is give you some ideas or ways to think about practicing these because these are tricky. It's different from verifying, it's different from clarifying. And oftentimes it's useful to kind of get a sense for what can I do to really develop a habit of powerful questions. And it does involve practice. And the first one, don't make it all about you. To be a person that can offer powerful questions and use these effectively with people, it's comes from a place of allowing a question to be in service of the other person across from you and not about my needs and what I need to solve for, what I need to know. Powerful questions aren't about us. They're about the person across from us, again, helping them advance their thinking. Okay, so that's an important part about practicing and really trying to think, is this question in place to help me and serve my needs? Or am I asking a question really in service of this other person across from me or this group across from me? Next up, I would offer keep a short list of go-to questions. In just a moment, we will share a resource called our Growth Powerful Questions coaching tool, and it has a list of example questions and questions often that we use with coachees, and we ask and share with other leaders to share with coachees or direct reports or people in their life. And so that can be an example that you can turn to, and we'll put that in the chat in just a moment. We can go to ChatGPT or other resources like it to get examples of what powerful questions might look like. And even books often can be really, really helpful. There's some great books that exist around the coaching space. One of the kind of essential reads that a lot of people can turn to is Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein. David Wheatley's read some recently. So if you want to message David in the room right now, you can get a sense for what David's been reading. That often can be great for inspiration with powerful questions. But once you collect those lists, I would encourage you, keep a short list. Identify maybe 5 to 10 that you can reference from time to time. What I've seen people do successfully is they might put them in their workspace right by their screen and have them available. So as they're hearing and as they're learning and really listening to the person across from them, they might scan and find a question that really makes sense to share with that person in that moment. It lines up with that area of need for that person. So keep a short list. It's really important and really helpful. Lastly, or not lastly, record yourself in action. Almost lastly, I would say record yourself in action. This can be really useful, whether it's in a Zoom setting or just the audio. And as you're listening to the recording, you can start to take inventory of the types of questions you're using. Are you asking a lot of advice captured with a question mark at the end? Are you asking open-ended questions or closed-ended questions? Are you looking back to see, were there moments where you asked a lot of questions that were about your needs and you missed some opportunities to really focus some questions about the needs of the other person across from you? And doing that kind of debrief, right, with those recordings in place can be really, really helpful just to get a sense and create some awareness for the types of questions you're using already with effectiveness and where you might have opportunities to do things differently. And then last but not least, I would offer other ways we can do this really well is to level up with professional development. One of the things that Humanergy offers is we do a lot of peer coaching work. So peer coaching means a group of 4 leaders often come together and over 6 to 7 to 8 sessions, nearly spanning a year's time, they work in work sessions and they learn how to ask and use powerful questions together. And then and if I get more specific around this, if a group of 4 of us were in the room, one person would start at as the coachee and they would share a challenge or issue they're having, and then the other 3 people would act as peer coaches, and they would start to practice using powerful questions and drawing out the thinking of their peer, meanwhile learning more and more about that peer's problem solving, and then gaining the confidence, right, of actually stepping into that space and using powerful questions more appropriately. And there's a lot of work that you can pursue with professional or with certification programs in the coaching space, again, in the spirit of really trying to level up the skill for those of you that are really interested in taking a deeper dive in what that could look like, and trying to bring that to life more and more for you in your workplace, outside of your workplace, and so on. And so as we round out our talk today, I just want to come back to this again. When you think about what's at the heart of growth and what really helps human beings take different strides and really kind of press forward and engage in their learning, engage more in their organizations, stories and questions become a critical player in that. We're specifically talking about powerful questions today, right? Because those lead to breakthroughs in thinking, they expand, they unlock, and so on. And when we can do thinking differently, we can ultimately start to behave differently, and we can push those behaviors that really kind of see the results that we're looking for.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name's David Wheatley. For further information about Humanergy, go to humanergy.com or check out our latest book, What Great Teams Do Great, from all good bookstores. Have a good one. Stay healthy.